Welcome to this video. Many people say, why would I want to learn to be vulnerable? I want to be strong. They believe that to not feel pain is to be strong, not understanding that vulnerability is true strength. In this video, I will talk about why vulnerability is true strength. Why vulnerability work is so essential on your healing journey. Let's focus on what you will get from this video first. You will get those two tools for you. The first is the shamanic remembrance process, and the second is the introspection or vulnerability process. And those are two separate videos. I will link to you somewhere here around my face for you to access. But before we get there, I really will guide you through that video now to see what is needed in vulnerability work, why this is even important to have those guided meditations, those tools for you to explore your vulnerable sides even more. Going inwards, exploring my inner world, really becoming truly vulnerable has been, I think, the single most important thing I did on my personal healing journey. And the reason is, and I think many people do that nowadays, or have that nowadays, is I had a very hard time to access my feelings and emotions. I was super much in my head. I was basically just walking around, not even feeling my body because I was so cut off from all that lower part of my body, from my feelings, from my emotions, from that vulnerable side. I never learned talking even truly from the heart. So it was really operating on the mind level. And so like me, many people nowadays just live in their head, totally cut off from this part in their body. And then many people have all these physical diseases, not realizing that most of them come from that split. It's never the physical pain. It's always something beneath it. You know, there's a reason why we call disease dis-ease. What is it that you are at dis-ease with? What is truly scratching beneath the surface? What is itching inside of you? And so all language is a very beautiful thing because it points to all of those things already. And yet we're so blind in our everywhere world that we don't see that. So vulnerability is always the key here to find that out. What is truly itching inside of you? What is truly the root cause of all those symptoms of diseases, of suffering, of whatever it is you're going through? There's always a deeper reason behind that. And so with these two vulnerability tools that I will give you in these other videos, but I will explain in this video now for you to really work with, because you need some introduction. You cannot just jump right into them. They're very powerful. So that's why I do this video, and it's quite in depth, but I really welcome you to watch all of it because it is so important to understand that, because many people formed so elaborate defense mechanisms around their vulnerability that when we finally go into the pain, that can be super overwhelming. So really make sure you watch the whole video to know what you're getting yourself into. But again, the beauty is, once we embark on that vulnerability journey, once we go through these tools deep inside of you, we can finally release all that past hurt, all that stuck emotions, all that deeper root causes of our true issues in life. So before I truly introduce you to those two game changer techniques, I really need some more time to explain and to explore a bit with you together now where this is actually coming from, that I even have to remind you of the importance of vulnerability. Why is that why we have such an aversion against vulnerability? And understanding this will really help you to make great use of those two processes later on when you really do the practice. Let's start. We already said that in our modern society, vulnerability is looked down upon. We believe that if we are open, innocent, and vulnerable, someone will take advantage out of me, will manipulate me. It's even considered as a very naive kind of thing to do. And in the ancient traditions or in the shamanic tribes I lived with, this is considered completely the opposite. They refer to those qualities as the most essential and vital ones. And my shaman always said, only when we become fully vulnerable can we discover our true and essential invulnerability. And listen to that for a second. What did he mean by that? Only when we become fully vulnerable can we discover our true and essential invulnerability. It's very deep. So what he meant by that is that when we let down all those resistances, when we become fully open, we become like a clear channel. And that means that everything just flows through us without any resistance, without any holding on to it. So when we're angry, we're just angry. When we're sad, we're just sad. But we're completely channeling everything that comes through us with no holding on to it, with no resistances whatsoever. And in that state of being, you actually explore that you're invulnerable. Because what can happen to you? Most pain, most suffering is created because there are resistances, because we don't allow the energy to freely flow through us, because we pretend, we harden up, we toughen up. And you will see that now later on when I explain that to you a bit more in detail, where this actually comes from, this hardening, this toughening up, this pretending to always be strong. So this is really exactly what happens when we live in that modern society of perfect worlds in those social media channels and everyone is just pretending in a way. Then what happens is we pretend, and that pretending can never be true, right? Because we all have deeper emotions and we're all not always happy and content. So when we try to pretend, we have to contract, we have to recoil, we have to push down and resist those energies for not flowing freely. So in that way, we keep this energy, we push it down, we keep it stuck inside of ourselves. And where is this coping mechanism? Where is that coming from? Let us explore that a bit more, because that is not random. So to understand that, we have to look at our lives from the very beginning. We start our lives from those state of source, from that state of innocence, of trust, of like infinite love, unconditional potential in a way. And then as children, when we are very little, what happens is that we get hurt, we experience traumas. And then we believe that this state of being it's possible to take this state of being away from us. And we experience that openness from a place of this very confused and scared child. And as a child, we cannot say, stop, I go to my room now to process my emotions and feelings. We don't have the capacity, we don't make the rules. Merely our parents decide for us. So what happens is, as a child, when you're severely hurt, when there is some trauma because of that openness, what can you do? You don't have the capacity to process it yet, but according to the law of cause and effect, this cause was there, so it has to create an effect. That is just a law of nature. So where does this effect goes? It only can be stuck in the body. Because where else can it go? And the interesting thing is, again, we even have that in language. When we say swallow it, suppress it, repress it, push it down. These are all these words. The trauma occurs and we push it deep down within our bodies. And to understand that a little bit better, I want to draw that real quick. Yeah, beautiful drawing, I know, right? So we have this little child here, and we have that trauma that happens to that little child, that very painful situation, whatever it was. And so, again, the child doesn't have the capacity to process it. So the only way to deal with it according to the law of cause and effect is it has to go somewhere. So it will remain stuck somewhere here within the child. It will be stuck in our body. And now something very interesting happens. Because the child is still part of this world. It needs to function. It needs to operate. Our world is very demanding, right? We need to function. We need to go to school. We need to, at one point grow up, go to work and all that. So in order to function and to deal with all the demands of the external world, something has to happen. Because if those trauma, loose feelings and emotions are just openly flowing within our being, then we would be constantly overwhelmed, constantly not being able to function because the child is just in a very weird state. And sometimes in severe trauma that can even happen. But usually what happens is that we harden up. So we basically encapsulate that suffering, that trauma within ourselves. And again, language is very beautiful because we say toughen up, harden up, build, or basically we guard ourselves, or we have an armor around our wounds. So this is exactly what happens. You build layers of hardening around our core wound to really be able to function, to move on with life. So initially, this is a very important coping mechanism. It makes the child go on in life and really sort of function at least. But now, what happens when we become adults? Beautiful drawing, I know, but it's not important. So the thing is, again, we have that trauma here inside, and we have that layer. And then usually, the more older we get, we create more and more layers around our wounds to just protect ourselves. But as an adult, this very much becomes our own jail. And the reason is that this block is there. And it becomes so big that it doesn't allow to be really in our hearts and to feel. Because in order to feel, we would need to go there too, and we can't allow ourselves that. So we live our lives very much here from a head perspective and are so cut off from that. And this is a huge problem in our adult life because when we don't deal with it, then it doesn't really allow us to feel. We become maybe indifferent, or we have those overwhelming emotions that we can't even connect to the real root cause again, because we build so many hardening layers around that root cause that it's so hazy that it's just some flashbacks maybe that are very unclear as to what actually happened that caused the real trauma and the pain inside of ourselves. And so in a large way, it also means we are cut off from innocence, from our childlike nature, from happiness, from playfulness, from peace, because it is needed to resolve that in order to come to that. So that's why all the spiritual traditions always say that the way back to a peaceful life is usually always to transcend the intellect and come back into our heart. And it even goes further, because I do believe, and it's not my personal opinion, that's what spiritual traditions all over the world really do believe, is that this is one of the main reasons for all sufferings in this world, and even for almost all physical diseases. Again, the language of the disease is, what is it that you are at dis-ease with? Many times it is this stuck, repressed energy that we have neglected and suppressed for so long in our lives. And then what happens is that it hardens. It's basically solidified scar tissues. And if energy is not able to move freely for such a long period of time, and you don't understand all those wake-up calls, we talk about that later, that you constantly get to resolve that, then this can even manifest in a very strong physical disease. So let me show it to you a little bit more clearly. Yeah, let's get rid of that child. So we have all these hope you can read that. We have all those external traumas, in the world that are coming at us. And those external events are basically just mirroring what needs to be dealt deep inside of ourselves on a subconscious level. So many of the relationships you attract, the people who display, maybe an incredible amount of anger or that hurt you, whatever it is, it most often points, I would say it always points, because it's just a mirror and a reflection of what needs to be dealt with deep inside of yourself. And when you truly understand that, that is such a big part on your healing journey. And so all these external events that happen to us are like wake-up calls. It's constantly someone is knocking, hey, you, look there. There's still something inside of you that needs to be dealt with. And then maybe you distract yourself again because we are, again, so cut off. We're in our heads. We think through everything. We don't want to go there. So then we again distract ourselves. And again, this knock gets stronger and stronger. Those situations, those events that occur pointing you stronger and stronger into that direction. And if you don't see these wake-up calls for what they truly are, then most people end up with a very strong physical disease. Because then eventually this wake-up call is like, now you have to lay down in your bed and be with it, that you hopefully finally get what this repressed stuff is telling you. And even then, some people never actually discover that and go there. But that is the great difference here, because you watch that video, and I'm not saying that is because of the greatness of what I'm telling you here, but in a way, yes, this is a timeless wisdom. And when we start to understand that, it was so healing for me on my journey, that all these deeper wounds are just merely attracting all those events that I see in my life, and that I get that mirrored for me to learn the lesson deep inside of myself. So again, the outside world here is mirroring our unconscious baggage that is so suppressed and repressed and hardened up around it. And so the question now is, how do we deal with it? How do we release that? And for that, we come again to vulnerability, and why vulnerability work is so very essential. Because we need to soften, we need to bring in a lot of softness to melt down those layers, those resistances around our wounds, to get to the center of it and to release that original event or pain that was there. And you may ask, why does that happen to you as an adult? Again, it's very logical. It's an inner science. Again, as a child, you don't have the capacity. You're just, bound to whatever your parent desired for you, and you're just not independent yet. But now as an adult, and sometimes again, this is very much beautiful how this is tied together with your own healing journey. In many people, those problems first surface when they made a big step in our life to become independent. So let's say when they moved out of their parents' house, when they finally earn enough money to be independent, to not have anyone have a say in their life, when they maybe can fully go inwards and focus, when they move to another place. Distance can be a very beautiful catalyst for getting deeper. And so then usually that first feeling, that very uncertain, hazy feeling still of like, ooh, there is still a lot inside of me. I still have a lot of skeletons in my closet. Again, it's a beautiful thing of language, points you that it's deep down. And when that comes, then it's time to work on that and to really release that. Because now as an adult, or at this stage of your healing journey, you probably bring in enough independence and also foremost enough wisdom and the capacity to really deal with that now. To see it from a perspective not of the scared child anymore, but now as an adult who brings in enough wisdom, enough love and capacity of the heart to re-experience those experiences and to let them go. And here is the very crucial point. Because how do most, I would say 99% of people try to fix when those deep emotions and feelings start to come up and overwhelm them? We are taught in our Western modern society to try again to pretend to be strong. So we push them back down again. And usually we search the solution here in the external. So we distract ourselves, let's say we binge watch Netflix, we fill the void by eating a lot of food. We seek those instant gratifications to numb again that deep inner root pain. Another thing is that we again just start dealing with it from a head level. So we start to think it through. And often then we even have that elaborate language. Toughen up, don't be such a pussy, get your life together, why are you whining again, come on, everyone else seems to get his life together, be a bit stronger, why do you lay in bed and cry again, go out there in this world, you need to make money, you need to be successful. That is the mind that tries to solve it. And mind you, this is never gonna work out. And even if you have maybe some elaborate mindset fixing techniques, they can only temporarily help you to again somewhat numb it or somewhat come to a temporary solution. It's never more than that. And the reason is that this can never be healed on a mind level. And again, when you see that here in this very beautiful drawing of me, you can understand that. Healing this stuff in the mind with the mind is not possible. To heal that, we have to come back down into our heart, into our feeling, to open up, to melt those armors and resistances, to bring in a lot of softness, to go into the center of our vulnerability, of our pain, of our suffering, to re-experience it, and then to release it and let it go and feel a ton lighter. It always amazes me how we are so taught, and we're constantly doing that by thinking that when we fix the external, we can come to the internal. And that is never working out. In those spiritual traditions, my teachers, they always said to me, first you deal with your inner world, you become happy, and then you go out in this world and do things. And people in the modern societies, they do it the opposite way. They do and chase things to resolve their inner issues, which can never work. And then when you see that it's about re-experiencing those energies that have been dominating all our external experiences. So once you deal with the inner stuff of it, the root issue of it, all those external things, those situations and events, they naturally resolve itself. And you will experience that. It's really, really very special thing to witness. Because we don't understand yet that when something is inside of you, it is energy and it sends out a subliminal message. So it really will even create for you that teaching to come into your life, to attract that into your life, to heal it, to resolve it. So the moment it keeps hardened and stuck here, we experience suffering and keeping learning us, pointing us to that wake-up calls. And then we are like, oh, life is so bad, it's such a misery. And again, we try to fix the external and not touching this. So when we resolve that internally, nothing is there anymore to get resonance, to attract even those hurtful situations, those hurtful ways of beings from the outside anymore, because we resolved it inside of ourselves. So this is the right way to deal with your issues. So that is a very important thing to always keep in your mind. Mistakes are always from the internal. When you understand that single sentence, you understood all the holy scriptures in the world. So I just took some time to draw that one more time to clear up a little bit of that mess. So the main question is now, how do we get there? So we need something that transcends the intellect. It's the first thing. We need to come back into the feeling. And then we also need something that is powerful enough that allows us to melt all these layers, all these armors around the core wound. And I first have to tell you, this is not easy. If it would be easy, then we would all be happy and striving and being in that innocence, childlike, happy mood. But the reality is, it is not the case. The reason is that doing that is not easy. Letting down all those resistances is not easy. It can be a very scary process, and many adults, they hardened up around their wounds. They created an armor around the wounds for maybe decades of their lives. They successfully numbed and repressed the deeper root causes of all their issues. So then doing the work to going actually into it again, that can be very scary, very overwhelming, very intense to feel those emotions again. And I can relate very much because on my personal healing journey, I many times went through the dark night, or for many years I went through the dark night of my soul. And it was a very intense healing process, very overwhelming. And yet, so very worth it. I'm living a life now and I've freed myself so much, and I see that in my clients over and over again. When you release those core wounds, your life will be another one, for sure. But for that, you really need to have two things, or let's say three things. The readiness to go there, the willingness to go there. Second thing is really the courage, which ties together with the first one, but really the courage, the willingness to face yourself, to finally really heal and go to the uncomfortable parts of it. Many spiritual people, or who consider themselves spiritual, they live a spirituality that is very much based on everything is love and light. And for me, my shaman always said, there are above the horizon people and below the horizon people. Below the horizon people have understood that in order to come to the light, you first have to go through the darkness, and then you come to the light. But the only way out is through. And I very much agree with that. Every coach, every mentor, every one who really is arrived at a place at inner peace and light knows that and resolved that darkness within themselves. And so the third thing you need is also the right guidance and the right tools to get there, which brings us to, again, the core foundation of this video, because remember, in the end, I know it gets a bit long, but it's a very important process for you to understand why we do this, why this is so important. In order to get to those tools, to those introspection vulnerability tools, or let's say, what are these tools that you can actually use to get there? And the number one thing that makes you get there are transpersonal modalities. Transpersonal modalities, I don't want to talk too much about that because I deal with that in another video, but transpersonal basically means transcending the ego, transcending the intellect, and bringing you into those deeper ways of being. And they're often classified because they're very, very strong, and often it needs that strength because our mind is very much resisting that. So it needs a lot of power to force us sometimes even into the pain, into the hurt, to really go into the darkness. And transpersonal modalities, again, I have another video on that, but I explored them for many years extensively, and I'm a transpersonal psychotherapist, so I do breathwork, which is one of those transpersonal modalities that really bring you deep. Another form of transpersonal modalities are plant medicine, psychedelics under some professional guidance, also deep meditation retreats. Another form is darkness retreats. So I spend, for example, 8 days in a pitch black dark room, because then again, in those times when you cannot distract yourself, there's no other way but you have to go inwards. You have to face your darkness in the darkness, so to speak. But apart from these transpersonal modalities, which I still highly recommend you to do, are vulnerability processes or vulnerability work. And that is something that you can do even in your own home. If you feel ready, if you feel courageous, we talk about that a bit later on. So those introspection processes I introduced to you now are a very amazing tool to go inwards by yourself. So let me write that down. We have 1, 2. So the second is we have those introspection processes, this vulnerability work. And then the third thing is what is super important. And the third thing that is really important, especially if you jump right after this video into the introspection processes I'm going to introduce you in a bit, set and setting plus the right intentions are very, very, very crucial. So the questions you should ask yourself is, do you have the right intentions? Do you really want to fully feel, face yourself and heal yourself? Do you really feel ready to go there? Do you feel safe? Do you have the right setting in place? Do you have a nice support network of your friends? Do you maybe have some coach or someone who could guide you when things get messy, when you really get to the center of that? And the fourth step is integration. So it's one thing to go on that deep journey and to open the box of Pandora and to really feel those intense, overwhelming, dominating energies, but it's a totally other story to integrate them and to really, deal with them in your everyday life and to really make sense out of them. So again, as a reminder, 1 is always done under professional guidance. 2 is actually most beneficial when it's also done under professional guidance of a coach or someone who knows about vulnerability work. But it can also be done on your own. And for that, I really have a few words of advice for you in that now. Only do these practices when you feel really ready for it. Do you really feel that is what is needed in your life right now? If it's a yes, if you feel courageous, if you really are so tired of your inner wounds, you want to get healing, then by all means go for it. However, these practices never replace professional guidance, a coach, a therapist, whatever that is. It is super essential that you may have someone who guides you through those processes, especially in a way of integrating what happened or what came up through those deep processes. So again, the best is if it is assisted by a professional coach, therapist, spiritual mentor, whatever. But in the end, always ask your intuition whether you feel ready for it. Your inner healer knows better than anyone else what you should do or not do. However, these were now really some words of caution, and there always is another side of things. And that side of things is that we are constantly running away from our fears, We usually never do this step to really face ourselves. And so we never really resolve it because, we feel miserable. And then at one point our head comes in, don't be such a pussy, don't be vulnerable, don't be like that. And then we get up and go into activity. And so we constantly circle up here, but we never really go there and resolve it. And that's why nothing really changed in our life. Not much improvement comes. So even if you don't do my introspection process, I promise, introduce them to you right now. Then really see this video as something you learned of the importance of becoming vulnerable, of the importance of when you really want to heal. Maybe now is not the right timing, but in the future, get a coach, work on it, and heal and free yourself. I keep seeing way too many of my clients living sometimes decades blocked, recoiled, contracted, maybe just 70% of their potential, always feeling unfulfilled to some extent, and then coming to me and doing this work and releasing this stuff, and then they're like, wow, I wasted 20 years or something of my life I lived like that, and I didn't live that openness, that innocence, that true being, what I really deserve in life, because that is our true nature. So on my journey to myself, courage is really what served me the most, to really face myself, that willingness. And even though you still don't feel ready to dive into those introspection practices, that is okay. And really, again, trust that inner voice. With that being said, let's finally get into those two processes I'm going to introduce to you right now. So let me draw them. So finally, here are the two introspection processes, or the vulnerability work, I'm going to introduce to you now. And they mainly differ in the way from where they enter the pain, from where they really access your deep root and inner issues. So the first one, the shamanic remembrance process, starts from a memory, from a situation, from an event that happened to you in the past. And therefore, it's a remembrance process. The second one, the introspection process, rather starts from where you are at right now in this very moment. So it's more coming from the present. And it can be either that you start from an emotional state, from a mood you're currently in, that you have a hard time to really discover where it is actually coming from. Maybe you're angry, you're sad, you feel indifference, whatever it is. This is your intro, this is your entrance point in this practice. Or it could also be a second access point, and that is coming from the body. So when you have a disease, when you feel a pain in your body, this is also the right one to choose for you. Because we start then from that pain, from that discomfort you feel inside of the body, and from there we go to the root, we explore deeper. So which one should I pick, or which one should I do first? Again, come from that place where you're at right now. If you rather feel, there is a memory, there is some kind of flashback situation of the past, I really want to work through again, or explore deeper, then use the shamanic remembrance process as a vulnerability work. When you feel like, right now in this moment, I feel so restless, I feel so much anger, I feel so much frustration, irritation, whatever it is in that very moment, if something is there, then the introspection process is great. Also, if you have a pain or a wound, especially if it's a chronic thing in your body, then again, choose the introspection process to get to the root of that pain and to explore it deeper. Both of these practices have been absolutely essential on my own hero's journey. It's part of the reason why I maybe can sit here and have or give you guidance on those practices right now, because they brought me, of course, together with a lot of other things, but to a very, very good place where now, as a spiritual mentor, as a coach, guide people and use these practices in my coachings to really bring people very deep into the root and to release those issues. So before you jump right into these processes now, a few words of advice. This first one, the shamanic remembrance process, was actually shared with me was shared with me by my shaman, who learned this from one of the wisdom holders, or the chief even, I think, of the Huitoto tribe, the lower Amazon rainforest basin. And again, it's a very, very beautiful practice that is tied together with a breath, and also helped me in the end to develop the second introspection process, which I largely came up with by myself. But again, it's nothing that I invented. I just used spiritual traditions that I lived with, tribes that I lived with, spiritual masters and mentors from all continents, from all over the world, to come up and to form that kind of vulnerability practice that not only starts from a past event, but also really starts from right now. Because what I discovered is that many times people nowadays, they don't even have a clear memory to start with. And so the second introspection process, this vulnerability work, is very helpful when people start even to, not have any clear event from the childhood or something traumatic event that they really want to go through. And it's rather that they always have those weird panic attacks or those weird feelings or those weird emotions, and they don't know where this is coming from. Or a chronic disease that they have no idea of why this is in their lives. So this practice can really help you then to explore that deeper. One thing I want to say is that no matter which one you do, it's always good to take baby steps. So especially when you're very new to these very powerful practices, really not start with the most overwhelming memory you want to explore. Maybe start with something more lighter difficult, let's say. And the same goes with the introspection process. When you maybe have a severe chronic disease or something that you really feel there is so much charge energy in that, then maybe don't start with that. Maybe start with rather something, I don't know, an emotion that you feel right now or a situation that was very recently there, and take it from there and really learn first how to work with those practices and processes until you go deeper and deeper. So a few things are really important, and I already mentioned them briefly earlier. Before you start, make sure that the set and the setting is right. Mostly, again, we are on that mind level and we don't really want to face all that stuff that is deep down inside of ourselves. So what really helps is to really set aside some time for these practices. So what I usually do is I take out my phone, I put a timer on 60, better is even 90 minutes. I put it in flight mode, I put it away, then I dim the lights, I set some great ambience, where I really feel comfortable to go deep and inwards. I close my door of the room. I make sure that no distractions will reach me. I let know my parents or my relationship, my partner, that I need some self-time right now. And then I really do this. And I go there for 90 or 60 or 90 minutes. And then I do these practices. And it's very important, and it sounds maybe even silly, to dedicate some time to be vulnerable. And yet, this is what we really need to do. I experienced that many times myself when I lay down and I don't set a timer. Then I do this practice and after a few minutes I'm like, oh, okay, nothing comes up much. I just go and distract myself again with activity. So by making it a strong commitment of setting a timer, of blocking everything out, of putting it in your calendar, maybe every Sunday you do that, then you can gradually learn to become more vulnerable and to remain in that passivity, because we have such a hard time to be in that yin state. We're always in that active yang, doing, acting things out, distracting ourselves, and it's so hard for us to just surrender, especially when it means to go into our pains. So it can really help to just make that a commitment. 60 or 90 minutes, I will just be with whatever arises and do these practices. And even if that means after half an hour into it, not much comes up and I would like to jump up and do something again, no. Then just sit with whatever comes up. Because my experience, that is always so valuable. Even if not some heavy emotions come, you will become and use this introspection as such a great tool to learn more about yourself, as like an inner scouting practice for your whole inner world, and to explore that and to see that for what it really is. So you will see again that those practices only last like 30 to 40, 50 minutes. And after that, again, it's not good to just jump right back to it. That's why we set the timer to 60 to 90 minutes. Maybe put on some nice music that again allows you to get back to the root, to get back into feeling. Put in some music that helps you to, really feel those feelings, to be in that state. And then, or sit a bit longer in meditation, whatever that is for you that feels good in that moment, to really integrate and process whatever came up through those practices. So with that being said, you are, I think, perfectly prepared to start your journey of exploring these vulnerability practices if you feel ready. One thing I want to share with you before I close this video, and that is how to integrate the work. Because I said earlier, it's one thing to open yourself up to those challenging energies, but then how to integrate them and what you can learn from them is a totally another story. So how to integrate after you've done one of those vulnerability works or practices. So the best thing is to have no appointments for the rest of the day, to really allow yourself to be with whatever came up. And I know from experience, myself and also in clients, sometimes we feel, not much came up. And then we do a lot of activities or go out. And yet on a very subtle level, a lot of energetic changes happened. And then sometimes it can even happen that being out with other people, then some strong emotions, because we're still in that vulnerable state, can come up. And we don't want that. Because with emotions, it's always two things. They can either be very, very beneficial when we release them at home under some guidance, when we really have that capacity to take them up and to get into a higher spiritual state of being. But they can also bring us a lot down when we uncontrollably act them out, when we are with other people and we project all that is stirring up inside of ourselves, those inner enemies, and project them out onto others. Because that will always backfire, right? So we don't want to do that. Therefore, take it easy the next few days, even try to not get too much into too many activities, to not jump into too many different containers at once. And if it's still very overwhelming what came up, know, and please do that. That's maybe the most important sentence I share with you here, is to really do get help. Find a coach, someone professional who has a lot of experience, who guides you and navigates you through these very emotionally, intensive feelings, and to really come to that light. It's totally fine to get help. Know that. As a child, we had teachers for everything. You had someone to teach you how to walk. You had someone to teach you how to speak. And yet when we're grown up, we think, I don't need help anymore. I'm self-sufficient. I can do everything by myself. That is, again, just coming from the mind, from the ego structure. We constantly need someone to guide us, or at least if you are open and willing to receive help, you will grow and mature and open up and heal so much quicker. Remember, the strongest people are the ones who allow themselves to be weak, to get out, to get help, to know that they can't do anything or everything by themselves. So please reach out to someone if you're going through a lot and you feel you need some more guidance. Over time, however, when you do those introspection processes regularly, you will gradually notice many changes in you. You will understand your inner world better. You will learn how to channel your feelings and emotions, to become that clear channel again. You will cultivate the capacity of the open heart, of openness, of interconnectedness, of unconditional love, and it will gradually ripple in to your everyday practices and into your everyday reality. It will sink into your normal state of being. And always remember that all your wounds are just a place for you where the light can enter you. They are just there for you to come back to that original state. You are now ready to do my 2 vulnerability practices if you feel ready yourself. And thank you so much for being here, for watching till the end. And may this be of great service for you. May this be as helpful as it has been for myself on my own healing journey. Thank you.